room at church. People would come up to me afterwards and say things like, "That was beautiful," or "I was so moved." Of course, they weren't talking about me. Maybe they thought they were, but no. It was the song, not me. It wasn't until years later that I finally understood that. The one person in the church who was consistently unimpressed was Thelma's daughter, Sarah, who was a year older than me. Despite our moms hanging out together constantly, we moved in different social circles in school. We got along okay, but we were never really friends. Sarah had this ironic smile, like she thought that everything was a joke and she was the only one who was in on it. Whenever I'd sing Amazing Grace, she'd watch people come up and talk to me after the services, and she'd smirk and shake her head. Then one day she said, "Your singing's not bad, but some of these people need to get a life." I should have been more offended on behalf of the congregation than myself, but of course I took it personally and pretty much stopped talking to her after that. Not that I think she noticed. She had plenty of other people to hang out with. Sarah was kind of a wild child. She drank, she partied, she spent a lot of time with a lot of different guys. And she was determined to do whatever she wanted on her own terms. One night, in the middle of the winter, Sarah went to a party. From what I had heard, she had gotten drunk and snuck off for a while with a guy named Chad. When Chad's girlfriend, Cindy, found out about it and confronted Sarah a couple of hours later, it was a fight. Cindy lost. The fight, her boyfriend, and her dignity, Sarah knocked back a couple of celebratory shots, got in her car, and drove home. She hit a tree going 70 miles an hour. She died. But in an operating room at the county hospital, miraculously they brought her back. Sort of. See, Sarah was in a coma and things were touch and go for a while. To my surprise, it was a really tough time for me. Even though Sarah and I weren't close, our families were. We all blamed Sarah and we felt guilty about it, even though there was no question she was at fault. I'd like to say that most of the tears that were shed were for Sarah and not because of her, but I can't say for sure. We all waited for Sarah to come out of her coma. We were hoping for another miracle. And 3 months later, we got it. Sarah woke up. Everyone knew that things were going to be tough from there on out, but Sarah would probably never be quite her old self again. That she would need therapy and in a wheelchair. That the real work was just beginning. But we'd had our miracle. Sarah had no memory of the night of the accident, and her recollection of her life in general was sketchy and incomplete. Her short-term memory was, well, it was gone. She needed constant reminders of who people were. She would start a conversation, then start it again 5 minutes later. It was hard. Even though she looked like Sarah, she wasn't really Sarah anymore. At least, not the Sarah we'd known. And as horrible as it sounds, the changes weren't all bad. Where Sarah had been snobby and arrogant before, now she was humble and appreciative. She loved to give hugs. There was no irony in her smile. When she said, "I love you," she genuinely meant it, and she said it to everyone. Her automatic response to every single person who would walk through her door was unconditional love. And even though her helplessness and memory loss sometimes made her difficult to be around, we all loved her back. It was impossible not to. Sarah was in the hospital for another 4 months after she woke up. They all took turns keeping her company, but people by their nature are selfish. We're never satisfied with what we have, and sometimes that's a good thing. Sometimes that's what keeps us going. And other times, it makes us expect too much. We have been given 2 miracles, and miracles have this reputation of being, well, miraculous. of being wondrous and amazing and happy. But the thing that people love most about miracles is their unfortunate reputation for being free. And while that might be true sometimes, some miracles come with a cost. Sarah eventually got out of the hospital, but she needed constant supervision. She was a child with no short-term memory in a fragile, crippled adult body. She was our life. We loved her, but we could feel ourselves crumbling under her weight, and even though we all felt it, no one would say the words. Sarah was a burden. The price of our miracles was too high. And even though it was unreasonable and irrational, we hoped that somehow Sarah would get better. We were hoping for another miracle. But there was none. For the next 8 years, we carried our load and paid the prices for the miracles that we had been given. In that time, Sarah became gradually weaker and our load became heavier. Somehow we managed. Until one day, Sarah finally let go for good. Tears followed. Tears of loss, tears of mournful hope that Sarah was finally at peace. And there were tears wept in private, secret tears, purging away 8 years of repressed resentment and guilt, at long last washed away in an exhausting, cleansing flood. We were finally free. All that was left was the funeral and to say goodbye. Through the past 8 years, my burden had been the lightest. I helped with Sarah more than anyone had ever expected of me, and though my efforts were always appreciated, no one had ever asked for them. Until now, there was one final burden, and this one was mine alone. Sarah's mom asked me to sing Amazing Grace at the funeral. I mean, I couldn't say no, but neither could I imagine doing it. I always cried at funerals, and this seemed impossible. But for the past 8 years, our two families had done the impossible. How could I do any less now? And I remembered Sarah's reactions to the song years before, but she was a different person when she died, and I had a strong feeling, somehow, that this would make her happy. As I stood at the front of the church, I tried to keep my mind blank, to not feel, to not think, to not hear the soft sobbing noises all through the church. I told myself there was no congregation, there was no flower-covered casket in front of me. There was no me. I did not exist. I did not matter. There was only the song. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. Nothing in the world existed at that moment but the song. And it was the one thing that I could not ignore. I could not ignore how it made me feel. And I understood that the members of the congregation had tried to express so many years before. The song brought them a sense of peace and comfort. It made them feel safe. It made them feel loved. It made them feel how Sarah would have wanted them to feel. I once was lost, but now am found. Was blind, but now I see.